If the God of the Bible is good, why does he do all things for his own glory? I hear this question a lot, and I want to frame the question like this. Why do Christians delight in God's God-centeredness? See, for us, we wouldn't have it any other way, for primarily two reasons. Christianity claims that God is the good, that is, the source and origin of all goodness in the universe. God is the highest object of goodness, being himself the object of infinite worth. If God is to treasure that which is infinitely valuable, then he must treasure himself. Let me put this another way. The definition of to glorify is not to make something more beautiful. If I were to wiggle my massive pectoral muscles in front of a crowd, I receive glory not because I'm making myself more buff. I'm glorified because I'm displaying the worth of my own excellent qualities. Thus, when you glorify something, you display what makes it valuable. In other words, you honor and uphold it. If God is the good, then God must be committed to his own exaltation. See, Christians believe that God is committed to the highest good. We believe that in all that God does, he seeks to display the most good possible. We might call this maximal goodness. If God is committed to maximal goodness, he must therefore be committed to his own exaltation, since he himself is the highest good. Secondly, Christians love the glory of God. Why? Suppose you're at the Grand Canyon. It's late at night, your eyes are drooping, and you can hardly see it. So you go to sleep and wake up at the moment when the sun best highlights the canyon in such a way that it reveals its beauty. You stand in utter awe at the moment when the canyon's beauty is most clearly displayed. See, when God puts his own excellence on display, our joy in him is maximized. Because God is the most beautiful, valuable object in reality, God's self-glorification is the most loving thing he could do. He's putting the highest happiness for the creature on display, delighting in the creature's participation in it. John Piper puts it like this: I've been married for 28 years, as of 21st of December. I love Noelle a lot. We've been through a lot together, really hard times and really good times. We've seen our teenage kids through some incredibly difficult teenage years. I cry most easily when I think about my sons and my little girl. Suppose on December 21st that I came home with 28 long stem roses behind my back and rang the doorbell. Noelle comes to the door, looks sort of puzzled about why I would be ringing my own doorbell, and I pull out the roses and say, "Happy anniversary, Noelle." And she says, "Johnny, they're beautiful. Why did you do it?" And I say, "Well, it's my duty." Wrong answer. Let's back it up. Ding dong. Happy anniversary, Noelle. Johnny, they're beautiful. Why did you do it? Nothing makes me happier than to buy you roses. In fact, why don't you change clothes because I've arranged for a babysitter and we'll go do something special tonight, because there's nothing I would rather do tonight than spend the evening with you. Right answer. Why? Why wouldn't she say, "You're the most selfish Christian hedonist I've ever met. All you ever think about is what makes you happy. What's going on here? Why is duty the wrong answer and delight the right answer? Do you understand? My wife is most glorified in me when I am most satisfied in her. If I try to change our relationship into a service relationship, into a duty relationship where I do not pursue my pleasure in her, she will be belittled, and so will God. When you get to heaven and the Father looks at you and says, 'Why are you here? Why did you lay down your life for me?' You better not say, 'It was my duty to come because I'm a Christian.' You better say, 'Where else would I want to go? To whom else could I turn? You are my soul's desire.'" You see, it's a moral obligation to worship God because God is the good. When we ignore God, we are ignoring that which is infinitely valuable. We are in essence denying that the good matters. But we don't worship simply out of obligation. We worship out of what only can be called a joyful obligation. That is, we worship because it's right to honor God, and because the soul's highest delight is in the worship of God. In the words of Jonathan Edwards, God seeking himself in the creation of the world, in the manner which has been supposed, is so far from being inconsistent with the good of his creatures, that it is a kind of regard to himself that inclines him to seek the good of his creature. It is a regard to himself that disposes him to diffuse and communicate himself. It is such a delight in his own internal fullness and glory that disposes him to an abundant effusion and emanation of that glory. That same disposition that inclines him to delight in his glory causes him to delight in the exhibitions, expressions, and communications of it. If there were any person of such a taste and disposition of mind that the brightness and light of the sun seemed unlovely to him, he would be unwilling that the sun's brightness and light should be retained within itself. But they that delight in it, to whom it appears lovely and glorious, will esteem it an amiable, that is, pleasant or admirable, and glorious thing to have it diffused and communicated throughout the world. In other words, God delights in our own happiness because it reflects his own fullness back to him. Happiness is one of his own attributes, and he himself brings it about in his creatures. Thus, his delight in our happiness is his delight in himself. Or, as Piper put it, God is most glorified in us when we are most satisfied in him. See, the reason I feel loved by God is not because I am made much of by God. God would be trivial to make much of me as an end in itself. The reason I feel so loved by God is that he would take a sinner like me and exalt his wonderful name in and through me. He would be so gracious as to put the praise of his name on my lips, to complete my joy in him, to glorify his name in my love for him. Though I am worthy of nothing but infinite wrath, he grants me infinite joy. He doesn't do it because he sees anything good or praiseworthy in me. He simply does it because it's his good pleasure to give sinners like me his kingdom. This is the God I worship. I hope you will consider drinking from this inexhaustibly good fount. In the midst of all the craziness of life, I have a God who is truly working all things for good. That God is working all things for his glory isn't a contrary pursuit to God's working all things for the joy of his people. Why? Because God is most glorified in us when we are most satisfied in him. Praise God. Praise the God who saves.